teachers. I'm so excited to join you today with Genesis 25 to 27. I got some incredible strategies today that are really fun, and I used a bucket of M&Ms to teach about the birthright in a way that hopefully helps teenagers to understand what the birthright is and the purpose of it and what you're supposed to do with your birthright. I got some engaging activities that ended up being so successful. I really hope this goes well for you. If nothing else, pick and choose some strategies that I use to engage the students to use in your class. Now, I'm not an official S&I rep. I'm not an official rep of the church. I'm just sharing some strategies. I do take the teacher manual and start there and then develop some strategies to engage my students. Now, before I go much farther, I got to share this with you. My daughter just got back from her mission, and she brought this little guy back to me. Do you know who this is? It's Jesus. And do you know what Jesus says? You're a masterpiece. Now, of course, I know it's Bob Ross, but I had a little fun with this with my students. I would walk up to them and say, hey, do you know who this is? They'd say Bob Ross, and I'd say, it's Jesus. You know what he says to you? You're a masterpiece. We'd laugh about it and giggle. And of course, Jesus, it is Bob Ross. But hey, I thought of you guys, my favorite people, the seminary teachers in the world, the heroes, putting on your superhero capes at 6 a.m., getting up and go teach the youth the gospel throughout the world. I love it. You guys are awesome. Now, today, I thought since Esau had to make this decision, birthright or a mess of pottage, I thought of playing Would You Rather with my students. And so I have them rotate around a little bit throughout the class. And each time they do, would you rather be able to turn invisible or be able to fly for a day? Why? I encourage them to talk to each other a little bit. That social part made it a very fun aspect of class as they interact with the social and talking to each other about the gospel and reading scriptures and studying. Let's go into the study. This lesson's about Jacob and Esau, and I just have them read this to each other back and forth. One person reads in pairs. One person reads the first paragraph. One person reads the second. And then I introduce this straight out of the teacher manual. This lesson can help you value the Lord's eternal blessings over worldly desires. I had a spot on the page where I had them list their top 5 priorities. And I in order of the most to least important. And I said, if you're really stressing about most important to the least, don't worry about it. Just get down 5 priorities. As you review this list, note any adjustments the Holy Ghost impresses you to make today during class. The other strategy in the manual was like writing their goals, and that could take more time. This one's like just simpler. What are your priorities? And I said, if you're not sure your priorities, think back to the last few days. Where did you spend a majority of your time? If you spend much of your time at school and doing homework, then school's a priority. But maybe school's not a priority. That's okay. It's just your thoughts. And if you say family's a priority, would your schedule the last week or so reflect that? It's just some thoughts. And then there's this little quote, desires dictate our priorities, priorities shape our choices, and choices determine our actions. And you might say choice and our actions determine our future. Anyways, that's from President. We go to this point and it says, as you study today, invite the Holy Ghost to help you see the value of eternal blessings. They take turns reading through that. Then I say, high five your teammate and rotate. And I create a little rotation where one person's rotating, one person's staying. And I say, okay, would you rather? Ask your neighbor the would you rather. And they do that. Then I get into explaining. Today we're going to be talking about the birthright, and I need to explain this to you. So I need some volunteers. I need a mom, a dad, a daughter, a son, and a daughter and a daughter. I just fictitiously made up this family, and I have them come line up in the front of the classroom. You got dad, mom, daughter, son, just in that order. And I say, okay, the oldest son, you're the next son, daughter. Once I get all the students up there, I bring out the bucket of M&Ms. Now, I was thinking about this. I just happen to have this. You could use cereal. You could use anything where you get a lot to use and to spread out and share. Now, you could use Fruities, I don't know, Tootsie Rolls, just something. You could use pennies if you had to. Anyway, I bring it up and I had to the dad and I said, Dad is super rich. And this little jar represents all his wealth, his gold, his silver, his land, his donkeys, his sheep, his goats, his chickens, whatever he has. This represents all of it. And then I make up a fun story and I say, oh, but the problem is Dad was at a camel race and Dad wasn't paying attention and got ran over by a camel and he died. And so we take this from him and Dad goes back to his seat. And I say, okay, what happens to this? And I said, who does it go to? And they say, well, the mom, or they'll say the birthright son or something like that. So I handed it to the mom and I said, who's the birthright child? And they say the oldest son. And the oldest daughter was like, it's me, I'm the oldest. And so we had this discussion and we hand it to and I say, it's the birthright son. And I say, okay, why the birthright son and not the daughter? And that's why I put the daughter as the oldest. I set it up. So wait, why isn't it going to the daughter? Now, and hopefully you don't get sexist comments, but if you do, you shut them down. Shut them down. And someone might say, because boys are more responsible. Shut it down. No, that is not true. And et cetera, et cetera. Then I say, this is the reason. Because the daughters would get married and they would leave the home. And the birthright son's responsibility is to take care of all the daughters till they're married and the mom for the rest of her life. And so that's why he's given the birthright portion, which was extra. And so then what I would do is say, okay, let's see how this plays out. And I got a spoon and I said, okay, birthright son, give a spoonful to the other son. And now let's say he goes off and gets married and then give some. Now, when the daughters get married, he has to provide a dowry. And so give some to the daughters for their dowry and to take care of them until they are of age. And so he take out a spoonful, gives some to the daughters, and they go off and now form a family. And then eventually that leaves just the birthright son and the mother. And I said, all right, give some to the mother. And that represents taking care of her whole life. So why is the son the birthright? That birthright is given the extra. Why? To take care of the family. So when we talk about we're the chosen generation, and we're talking about you have the birthright, we might say some things like that. Why are we given more? It's not so that we're just spoiled rotten, we're the favorite. It's so that we can take care of the family. And as Israel, we're supposed to take care of God's family. Where is that? Everywhere. Everywhere. We have the gospel. What are we supposed to do with that? Share it with the family. So that's just a little explanation. I like doing that little explanation, and we had a little fun. We laughed a little bit. Whoa, we got a big family. We just giggle a little bit as we're talking about this. I don't know why. I just thought this was so fun, and I hope it goes well for you in your class if you just try to share it. Okay, now next slide. Take turns. Read this. I say rotate, find a new partner. Every time we rotate, we give each other a high five, give them a you're awesome, you're amazing, you're incredible, you're the GOAT, whatever fun. And then I say, okay, here's your would you rather. They sit there, ask each other. Now, these are quick. This is no more than a minute, maybe 45 seconds. But that social is really important to creating a beautiful environment in class. Then I say, read this. This is the introduction to the story. And then I say, read this with your teammate, looking for how Esau demonstrated that he did not value his birthright. Now, I don't know if he officially sold his birthright in this story, if this was just a playful thing, but the last sentence is important. Esau despised his birthright. He did not take it seriously. Now, I forgot to mention this. When we're talking about the birthright, I said, do you want the birthright son to hold the birthright or the responsible son to hold the birthright? So even though it was set up traditionally that the oldest son took the birthright or got the birthright, If that son was irresponsible, no, we're not giving him the birthright. We're not giving, unless he's like the prodigal son and goes, takes it off and spends all his money and leaves mom behind. We want the responsible son. And that's what's going on in this story. Is the first son, he's not very responsible. He does not cherish his birthright responsibility. He does not take it seriously. And so I don't know, for example, if this is when he lost his birthright, or was it this story, or was it this story? So after I say, read this with your teammate, how did he lose the birthright? We talk about it. By the way, I use the New International. It's just easier to read. I have King James Version pottage. The NIV uses stew. Basically a bowl of soup. And we're going to talk about that later more. The next part, read with your teammate. I introduced this, that marriage choice, and Hittites were Canaanites who worship false gods. So you have people who worship Jesus, and you have people who worship statues, or the sun god, or Tesla. Just joke about it a little bit. Anyway, we want our children to marry in the temple and be covenant, and Esau chooses something different. He didn't marry covenant daughters of God. And one class they mentioned, wait, 2 wives? Yes, they practiced polygamy back then. And here we go. Despite Esau's bad choices, Isaac in his old age summoned Esau to give him the birthright blessing. And you have this whole story of where Isaac blesses Jacob with the birthright blessing, and Rebekah disguises Jacob. Now, this is just one of those stories where it's like we don't have enough detail to know what's going on. In my marriage, I think we would talk about, hey, we're making a will. Who do we want to be in charge of distributing the assets? And I wonder if there was a little bit of that going on, but then there's this story that's interesting, like, what? But anyway, long story short, Esau's not responsible. He marries outside the covenant. And they don't want him to be in charge of taking care of Rebekah afterwards. So somehow Jacob ends up with the birthright. And it's probably based upon Esau's misguided direction in his life. So high five your teammate, rotate. Then we get into look for Esau's reaction when he loses the birthright, and he weeps. And he's sad that he's lost out the birthright and the blessings that go with it. And so we talk about this, and then I have the students write a principle, and there's a box on the study page PowerPoint, first free in the show notes on YouTube. So write a principle, and I just want to see what they come up with. And they come up with some pretty good principles, but I have them share with their teammate or write one with their teammate, whatever they want. Share some with the class. What do you mean by that? And then I have them write down this one. Oh, excuse me, right here. Choosing immediate or worldly desires over God's eternal blessings can lead to sorrow and regret. And I have them discuss this. How can one small choice change someone's future? How do people sell their birthright today? High five your teammate and rotate. But that's a good discussion. How do they sell their birthright today? I shared a personal story of losing the birthright, and I use that from my family. And if you want, you can use this story if you like, and I don't mind at all. So here's the story. This is my family of origin. This is me. Oh, I know I was that kid who couldn't take good pictures. And this is my oldest brother, family of 7 kids. And my oldest brother, when he was 16 years older than me, and in junior high, he started smoking, and that led to first cigarettes, then marijuana, then alcohol, went the whole drug route. And I remember experiences of finding him smoking outside of our house, and my parents, lots of trauma there. He'd come home drunk sometimes, and violent and angry, so I was just a kind of a silent observer as a little kid to him coming home in a bad spot and seeing him arrested and have problems with the law, etc. Well, when I was 10 years old, my brother got his girlfriend pregnant, and she had a baby. And my dad blessed the baby in church. And about a month later, my brother died of a drug overdose. And very tragic experience for my family. Now, who is this? This is Rick Jr., my nephew, my brother's son. And I talk about what did he miss out on as he sold his birthright, the opportunity to be a father. What did he miss out on? He missed out on a grandson and a granddaughter, his daughter-in-law. He missed out on beautiful beach trips with his family. Here's a picture of them and their granddaughter being introduced to my brother. And she was 3 or 4 years old, meeting, quote unquote, meeting her grandfather for the first time in that setting. And I talked about what did my brother lose out on. He missed out on family trips. He missed out on Christmases. How many Christmases with his son did he miss? How many Christmases with his granddaughter did he miss? And this is his grandson. His grandson now is in high school and is just a fine young man. And his son, Rick Jr., is an incredible person who's lived a productive family life and has a great job as a manager and done awesome. And my brother's lost it all, missed it all. And it's just gut-wrenching. And having been now, I'm a grandpa, I think of, man, these are my cherished blessings, is being with family. These are my cherished moments with family. And I have a grandson, but just a year old, and one 6 months old. And I look forward to having them going to their events and seeing them grow up. It was all lost for a cigarette, so to speak, that led to the downfall of my brother. Now, contrast that with this young man. He has a decision to make in high school about surfing or seminary. Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. And I did some Facebook stalking, and I found him because it says his name in the video. And here is some later pictures. So this video was probably made in 2010, I'm guessing. And here's him in 2016, and here's him in 2022. And yeah, I don't know anything about Sean, but I hope he's doing well. But it all comes down to how we treat our birthright, the gifts that we've been given, and what are we going to do with them. With the birthright gift comes responsibility. So high five your teammate and rotate. Then we're going to get into this scenario if you have time. And the scenario goes, your Sunday school class decides that teenagers are too distracted and having troubles putting Christ first in their life. Your teacher asks you to come to the next class, prepared to share a scripture story to teach the class why we need to make the most important things in our life. And so they're going to prepare to teach. And the first thing they're going to use to prepare to teach is read some general authority quotes. And I say, okay, one of you read the first two, one of you read the bottom half, or one read the top half, one read the bottom half. Give them about a minute and a half to read those, share with their teammate, teach your teammate. And then from there, I say, okay, turn over your paper on the back side. I want you to write phrase from general authority, quote to share that you like. And so they turn it over, write that down. And then I say, then we go to the principles to live by from Jacob and Esau. I say, one of you read the first 5, one of you read the bottom 5, or is it 4? I don't know. And I really love this, and what this has brought to my class is using AI to create principles, and it just makes it really relevant when you read these principles. It brings the story home, and they can easily talk about it afterwards. So they read over them, find a principle you like, share with your teammate. If you want, you could rotate teammates and go back to one of these questions I created. And then, so they're going to write that right here, principle you want to teach, and explain it in your own words. And then I say, okay, summarize the story of Jacob and Esau and try to come up with a personal example. And then the last one is wrap up. At the bottom of the lesson that they're going to be giving is a hashtag wrap up. And I love this way to end class or just end a teaching. Write a fun, catchy hashtag to summarize your learnings today. For example, hashtag love God and love all people, hashtag Jesus loves you. Those are just samples. They don't necessarily relate to this lesson, but there were some fun ones. Hashtag don't be a Esau, hashtag don't sell your birthright, hashtag think celestial. And then I put them in pairs and say, okay, now you're going to teach your teammate what you wrote for your lesson. I gave them about 2 minutes to teach their lesson, a minute to two, to just go through everything they had written right here. And they end with the hashtag wrap up with their teammate. Then switch, the other person teaches, and give them a couple minutes to teach. Now, that's if you have the time for that. Otherwise, I could go to, okay, let's share your hashtag wrap-ups. What did you come up with? And they would say their hashtag wrap-up and talk about it. There also a great discussion is, what principle did you like here? And what was significant about it? And how does it relate to teenagers? And so, for example, don't trade long-term blessings for short-term relief. And say a student shares that, and I'd say, oh, that's an interesting principle. What did you like about that, and how do you think it relates to teenagers? And tell us more about that. Just a beautiful way. Having these principles, I really love this strategy. I'm going to be using it a lot more moving forward, because it takes a lesson that's fuzzy and helps them just like applicable principles that are relevant for teenage lives. And also I'm finding that AI, no offense, does a better job at it than my teenagers. And I'm hoping that they'll get better at writing them after they experience what AI is teaching them as the principles. And so it's just a great way. And like I said, you just enter the story into AI. Genesis 25, the story of Esau selling his birthright. What principles could we learn from this? And it'll just spit them out. And it's awesome. So there you go. That's the strategy for this lesson. I enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed it. And hey, don't forget, you're a masterpiece. Have a great day.